The material submitted for this critique explores the Jewish theological perspective that the Messianic era is not a divine rescue mission, but a reality humanity must build through moral choices. I can see what you were going for here, so let's see how we can strengthen this.
Yeah, it's an exceptionally strong baseline, honestly. It completely dismantles the whole, opiate of the masses trope by demanding real human participation.
Right, exactly. And to elevate it, we are going to focus on three main areas. First, structure and flow, specifically regarding modern tangents. Second, completeness and focus when looking at the historical scorecard. And third, the effectiveness of the opening and closing, particularly managing that final promotional pivot.
That sounds like a solid roadmap. Where are we starting?
Integrating highly modern, speculative concepts like artificial intelligence late in the narrative disrupts the established historical and theological flow.
Wait, I actually want to push back on that slightly before we dive too deep, because the core thesis of the author's piece is that humanity is tasked with building the vessels that God eventually fills, right?
Right.
So if we are talking about human ingenuity and our role as active partners in creation, isn't artificial intelligence the ultimate contemporary example of us building a vessel? It just feels like a very logical, modern endpoint to that argument.
So, thematically, in a vacuum, you could definitely argue that AI is a vessel, but we have to evaluate how it actually functions within the specific narrative architecture that the author has built up to this exact point.
Okay, I see.
The weakness here is the cognitive and emotional whiplash it creates, based purely on its placement, because the transcript spends, a really significant amount of time building a deeply grounded, ancient, and historical progression.
Yeah, that's true.
The audience is taken systematically through Genesis, the burial of Jacob. We move through Exodus, the nuance of Pharaoh's hardened heart. And then the author meticulously details the destruction of the Second Temple and brings us into the late 20th century with the ideological collapse of the Soviet Union.
Right, so the entire journey relies on physical history, textual interpretation, and human sociology.
Precisely. It is a very earthy, human-centric timeline. And then, suddenly, right at the climax of the piece, there is this introduction of AI as a potential vessel for miracles.
Yeah, it does stand out when you list it like that.
It feels incredibly jarring. It's like introducing a speculative sci-fi element right in the middle of the third act of a meticulously crafted historical drama. It breaks the spell. It forces the audience to stop thinking about the human soul and start thinking about server farms and algorithms.
Let me look at the surrounding text to see the emotional context there. Ah, okay. I see the issue now. Right before the AI mention, the piece is digging into the concept of baseless love and the profound mindset shift of asking, what does my creator need from me?
Right.
And that is an intensely emotional, deeply spiritual peak for the reader.
And what happens when you drop artificial intelligence into that exact moment?
You basically pull the reader out of their heart and force them entirely back into their analytical brain. It becomes a huge intellectual distraction.
Exact. The audience stops meditating on their own moral agency and starts debating the mechanics of machine learning in their head.
Yeah, it completely dilutes the emotional core of the argument right when the author needs it to be its absolute strongest.
So, our suggestion to fix this flow issue is to either relocate the AI discussion so it functions as a much earlier supporting example of building the vessel, or to remove it entirely to maintain a strict, unbroken focus on human moral development.
Okay, so if we try to salvage it by relocating it, where does it actually belong? Because it clearly shouldn't be anywhere near that emotional climax.
Look at the section where the material discusses the ingathering of the exile. The author talks about airplanes carrying people to Israel, framing aviation as a physical vessel that fulfilled a spiritual promise.
Oh yeah, that would be a much more natural fit. The author could seamlessly group those technologies together right there.
Right.
You could write something along the lines of, we built the planes that gathered the exiles, and today we build the digital infrastructure of AI. God uses the vessels we create, but we must be the ones to point them toward redemption.
That's a great example. It keeps the technological vessels quarantined in one cohesive thought, much earlier in the piece, before the emotional stakes are reached.
It really does smooth out the flow.
It does, but I would actually strongly advocate for the second option, which is complete removal.
Really? Just cut it?
Yeah, because if you cut the AI paragraph entirely, look at how the transition functions. You move straight from the concept of humanity becoming partners in creation directly into the historical anecdote about the Rebbe.
Oh, the story where the Rebbe is asked, what's going to be, and he completely rejects the premise.
Yes.
Answering instead, what can I do?
Exactly. By removing the speculative tech entirely, you keep the lens locked on personal human agents. The momentum from the discussion of baseless love drives straight into the demand for personal action. The audience doesn't hit a technological speed.
Yeah, the flow just remains unbroken. It goes from ancient history to recent history, straight to personal responsibility.
Right.
But if you strip out the speculative tech, you are leaning entirely on that historical progression to carry the audience to the end. And that timeline actually presents a new problem.
Okay, let's hear it.
Presenting a purely upward trajectory of human moral development risks making the final call for baseless love feel disconnected from the complexities of contemporary reality.
Ah, you are referring to the historical scorecard section?
I am, because the author lists an incredibly impressive array of human triumphs over the last 2 centuries.
Right.
The material points to the abolition of slavery worldwide, the democratization of knowledge through the internet, the widespread adoption of universal ethics, and the end of institutionalized systems like apartheid.
With the argument being that these historical milestones are evidence that humanity has been slowly building the infrastructure for the Messianic era.
Yes.
It's a compelling point, showcasing how ideas that were once radical in the Torah have become baseline societal expectations today.
It is compelling, absolutely. But the weakness here centers on how friction is handled in the text, or rather, how it is entirely ignored. By painting the modern era as this near-perfect ethical infrastructure that is basically ready and waiting for one final touch, material inadvertently gaslights the reader. It ignores the very real, visceral, baseless hatred that the audience experiences in their daily lives.
I can definitely see the author's intent, though. They clearly want to instill hope.
Sure.
They are trying to dismantle the cynical view that the world is getting worse, and they want the reader to realize that we have already done a massive amount of the heavy lift.
Hope is crucial, but hope without friction breeds complacency.
That's a great point.
If the transition from these massive historical victories to the final missing ingredient, which the text identifies as baseless love, lacks necessary friction, the urgency just drops to 0.
Right.
The reader thinks, well, the infrastructure is 99% complete. Things are going great. We just need to sprinkle a little more love on top and we are done.
Right. And it creates a massive dissonance between the text and the reader's lived experience. The audience knows we live in a deeply polarized, fractured world.
Exactly.
So if the author doesn't acknowledge that reality, the final call to action feels like a naive platitude rather than a profound spiritual challenge. So the suggestion here is to actively introduce friction into this scorecard by acknowledging the messy, polarized reality of the present.
Yeah.
The reader needs to feel that this final step of baseless love isn't just a cherry on top. It is the steepest, most treacherous mountain left to climb.
But how do we actually inject that friction without completely destroying the optimism the author is trying to build? I mean, we don't want to turn a hopeful piece into a depressing one.
We use a yes, but structure when presenting those historical triumphs. You validate the progress, but immediately juxtapose it with our modern challenge.
Okay, I like that.
So instead of just celebrating the internet, the author could write, we have successfully democratized education and knowledge, yet we now use those very networks to divide ourselves into hostile digital echo chambers.
Wow, yeah.
Or we have developed the agricultural resources to end global hunger, yet systemic poverty and greed persist.
That instantly grounds the argument. It respects the reader's intelligence because it validates what they actually see when they look out the window. It basically says, look how far we've come, but look how tragically we are misusing the tools we built.
And that fundamentally shifts how you frame that final ingredient. Once you establish that the tools are ready but the humans are failing, baseless love stops being a passive feeling.
Right.
You can frame it as the absolute hardest, most fiercely necessary antidote to the specific types of modern polarization the audience is exhausted by.
It transforms baseless love into an active, almost rebellious choice.
Exactly. You contrast the technological readiness of the world with its current emotional unreadiness.
Yeah.
The author could say, our global infrastructure is ready for redemption, but our hearts are lagging dangerously behind. Baseless love isn't just a nice thought. It is a radical defiance against the culture that monetizes our outrage.
That framing is incredibly powerful, and it also aligns perfectly with the earlier themes the author set up regarding Purim.
Oh, how so? Remind me.
Well, earlier in the piece, the author contrasts the revelation at Mount Sinai with the story of Purim.
Right.
At Sinai, the Torah was allegedly forced upon the people. The mountain was literally held over their heads. But on Purim, during a time of exile and hiddenness, The Jewish people voluntarily chose to re-accept it. The entire point is that choosing the good when it is difficult, when God is seemingly hidden, is infinitely more valuable than doing it when it's easy and obvious.
That's a brilliant connection. Because if the author paints the modern world as a utopia that just needs a little more love, choosing love is easy. It's Sinai.
Exactly.
But if the author paints the modern world as technologically advanced but emotionally bankrupt and deeply divided, choosing baseless love becomes incredibly difficult. It becomes Purim. It requires profound moral agency.
And if you successfully create that urgent, defiant call to action, the audience is going to be on the edge of their seat. They are spiritually activated, which actually brings us to the final moments of the transcript.
Let's hear it. Abruptly pivoting from a profound spiritual call to action into a promotional documentary trailer undercuts the emotional weight and core thesis of the piece's climax.
Yeah, this is a classic hazard when creating content for a network or a platform. You have built this incredible philosophical momentum, but you also have a mandate to cross-promote other content.
The author reaches a genuinely beautiful, resonant peak here. The text concludes with the rabbi's advice, shifting the entire paradigm of the listener from waiting passively for the Messiah to what can I do today to partner with God?
Right, it's so active.
The reader is inspired. They are ready to act in this physical world. And then, literally the very next sentence is a hard-cut promo for a new JDV Plus documentary about heaven, hell, and the afterlife.
Oh man, the tonal whiplash is severe, but the weakness here is actually much deeper than just an abrupt transition. There's a massive ideological contradiction happening.
Walk me through that. Because from a purely programming perspective, I can kind of see why the network put it there. The listener is engaging with deep Jewish theology. So a documentary offering a uniquely Jewish perspective on the afterlife seems like a highly relevant, adjacent topic.
It might seem adjacent on a spread, sure, but it is fundamentally opposed to the thesis the author just spent 15 minutes building.
Right.
A central argument of the entire text up to this point is that Judaism focuses obsessively on bringing heaven down to earth, rather than escaping this physical world for some ethereal after. The text explicitly tells the reader not to focus on escape.
Oh, wow, I see it now. The author is demanding that the audience roll up their sleeves and fix the physical world, and then immediately says, by the way, click here to learn about what happens when you leave the physical world.
Exact. It actively undermines the philosophical engine they just built. It feels like the author is saying, focus on building this world. Anyway, here's an hour of content about the next world. It breaks the spell entirely.
Yeah, that's rough.
So our suggestion here is to deliberately build a thematic bridge that separates the core theological argument from the commercial promotion. You cannot just slap the promo at the end. You have to frame the new documentary not as a departure from the earthly topic, but as a continuation of the exact same mission.
You have to guide the reader across that gap so they don't fall into the chasm between the spiritual message they just absorbed and the call to action for the streaming platform.
Exactly. And we can achieve this structurally or thematic. The simplest way is a hard structural break. You conclude the core argument and let it breathe. Deliver that final, powerful line. The question isn't when will the Messiah come, but when will we finish setting the stage? Then you force a clear structural pause.
Right.
If this is audio, you use a dramatic 5-second pause. If it's video, you fade to black. You let the audience sit with the weight of that profound thought.
Just a deliberate moment of silence to let the resonance settle.
Yeah. And only then, as a completely separate postscript, do you introduce the documentary. You isolate the promo so its commercial nature doesn't contaminate the philosophical climax.
That works. But, it still feels a bit like a bandage. What if we wanted to actually weave them together? How would we build a thematic bridge that doesn't contradict the thesis?
This requires rewriting the transition to directly challenge the listener's expectations based on the previous 15 minutes. You take the ideological tension we just identified, the friction between focusing on earth versus focusing on heaven, and you use it to your advantage.
I'm intrigued. How does that sound in practice?
You would write something that leans directly into the apparent contradiction. The host could say, if our ultimate goal is to bring heaven down to earth, why should we even waste time talking about the after?
Ooh, I like that.
Right? And then you follow it up with, it turns out, to understand how to fully partner with God in this physical world, we have to unlearn everything society has taught us about the next. To see how these two worlds rely on each other, check out our new JTV Plus documentary.
That is phenomenal. It takes the exact contradiction that threatens to derail the piece and turns it into the primary hook for the promotion itself.
Exactly.
It anticipates the listener's confusion, validates their objection, and promises that the documentary holds the answer.
And more importantly, it maintains the philosophical tone. It makes the promo feel like a necessary, intellectually rigorous next step in their education, rather than a jarring commercial interruption handed down from the marketing department.
Yeah.
It honors the intelligence of an audience that we know is deeply familiar with this complex source material.
Looking at the transcript as a whole, the conceptual heavy lifting here is already done. The underlying architecture is just so strong.
Oh, without a doubt.
The way the author contrasts the supernatural, miraculous victory of the Six-Day War with the slow, voluntary, ideological dissolution of the Soviet Union, using that to prove that God is moving away from overt miracles and relying more on human agency. That is a massive, ambitious argument.
It completely upends the passive opiate of the masses view of religion. To maximize the impact of this profound subject matter, the author just needs to execute on 3 actionable structural shifts.
Let's recap them.
First, eliminate the distracting AI tangent to maintain a smooth, unbroken progression from historical precedent right into personal agency. Second, inject real-world friction into the historical scorecard, juxtaposing our technological triumphs with our emotional failures, so the demand for baseless love feels desperately urgent.
Right.
And finally, build a thematic bridge into the documentary promo that uses the tension between heaven and earth as a hook, preserving the emotional climax of the piece.
We highly encourage the listener to take these suggestions, play around with the pacing in those thematic transitions, and submit the revised work back to us for another critique. I am very eager to see how this evolves once those roadblocks are cleared.
Because ultimately, crafting a deeply compelling theological argument isn't about waiting for inspiration to strike from above. It's about taking the blueprint, picking up the hammer, and doing the hard work of building the vessel yourself.